So exciting things are happening. I'm very, very, very excited about our next speaker, Ms. Christine Fox. She not only has been an inspiration for individuals in Tom Cruise's Top Gun, she's also, at one point was the U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense, and now works with a group at Johns Hopkins where she oversees a lot of the policy. So she's seeing 6,000 researchers come up with new ideas around robotics, AI, all sorts of new big breakthroughs. And her job is to look at these things and understand what's happening policy-wise, what's the impact that it'll have on the world. So she quite literally is a world leader when it comes to a speaker, when it comes to what happens with robotics and ethics. So her presentation on the fine line of robotics is something I am very excited to hear. So with that said, will you give Christine Fox a hand?
Well, thank you, Nick, for that overly generous announcement. And I'd also like to just take a moment to thank Nick. I think that bringing this group together has been amazing. I have enjoyed every minute of it. I've already enjoyed hearing the first two talks, meeting all of you and his hospitality. So I vote that we give Nick a round of applause for the Think Big Festival in the first place. Thank you. Well, I have spent my entire life doing analysis in the world of national security. When I started my career, the world of national security was the place where cool things were developed, right? DARPA, internet, you know, stuff like that. I think we just heard a talk that shows that may not be the case anymore. So it's a real privilege for me to be able to come to the Think Big Festival and meet so many of you who are working on so much cool technology that is out there. So while DARPA still does very cool stuff, the Applied Physics Lab is doing very cool stuff. The chance for us to work as a community to think about all the cool tech that's coming down, I think, is very powerful. With all of that cool stuff, though, does come some pretty big questions, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. So as you heard, I started my career working in the world of aviation. I worked at a time when beautiful airplanes called F-14s, tactical jets, were flying off of amazing aircraft carriers, doing amazing things that if any of you saw the movie Top Gun, you got a taste of. Now today, very cool airplanes, F-18s, and soon-to-be Joint Strike Fighters, are flying off of even cooler aircraft carriers, and I think that technology will be with us for some time to come. But more recently, we've been flying out of the Defense Department vehicles like the one down here. That's a Reaper. Reapers are remotely piloted vehicles. Those Reapers were flying over Afghanistan when the pilot was in Nevada. That pilot was getting streaming information from the Reaper that was showing him what he was seeing, and if appropriate, the pilot in Nevada could tell the Reaper to employ weapons. Often he told that Reaper to employ weapons in direct support of combat forces on the ground. So you now have remotely piloted working as a team with ground forces on the ground. I think that's pretty clearly a taste of a future. And I can tell you this is game-changing. This has been game-changing, not just in Afghanistan, but in the war on terror and many other applications. So now what, right? Where are we going? Are we going to have fully autonomous people flying these airplanes, or are we going to have the planes doing it all on their own, making their own decisions? I don't know, but we just heard a talk that suggests some of those things are actually possible. This is not just something that we're thinking about in the United States. This is a global push for new technology in this field. Up on the top left, you see our Reaper that was so important in our operations overseas for the Defense Department, now doing border patrol for the Customs and Border Patrol Agency. On the right, you see France's latest effort. That's been a vehicle being prototyped by Dassault. It's a flying wing. Our U.S. Navy is doing something similar to that, but that's a very high-tech, very capable vehicle coming out of one of our key allies. Bottom left there, you see Israel's Eaton. It's the second largest remotely piloted vehicle in the world. It has incredible endurance. So if you think about Israel's troubled borders, you can see the advantage of having something that can patrol those borders for a very, very long time. And on the right is a vehicle that's being developed by Iran. And this is clearly developed after missile technology, but they're working to make it remotely piloted. They're working to make it have some of the capabilities to include weapons delivery that we have been developing ourselves and with our allies. So this is not a technology question that can wait. So my talk to you today is not about waiting. My talk to you today is about thinking as we push forward about some of the complex issues that we're all going to face. So autonomy is not new. You just heard a talk this morning on patents. They go back robots a long way. Autonomy has actually been with us for quite a while too, but you want to think about that in terms of extreme environments. In the most extreme environments, we've been pushing ourselves as technologists to develop autonomous systems because of the sheer need. This is a picture of the New Horizons spacecraft that just successfully flew by Pluto. That spacecraft was designed, built, launched, and managed by the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. So when it successfully flew by Pluto, I can tell you APL was a big science party. But that vehicle is thought to be the most fully autonomous system that's been deployed to space. So what happened here is as this little vehicle came up towards Pluto, and it took that last photograph, that full-frame picture of Pluto that was in all the papers, from that moment until it was all the way through the flyby of Pluto and on the other side, it went silent. It went silent, I think it was over 18 hours. I don't remember the exact time, but it's about in that order. And it was doing, through that flyby, all of the data collection, all of the surveillance of Pluto and its move care, and it was negotiating through the flight plan, getting to the closest point of approach, completely disconnected from Earth. And it wasn't until it got to the other side and was pointing back at Earth that it communicated with us and basically said, I made it, I did everything I was supposed to do, you guys, you worry too much. And believe me, there was a big cheer when that happened. But this little guy, I mean, we didn't want to waste time talking to it. And besides, it takes 4.5 hours in one direction, so it was pretty impractical. We wanted the guy to do what it had to do. And it did it. And it's got data that's coming back to Earth we're going to be studying for years. It'll take us 13 months just to get all the data back from what that little guy collected as it went by Pluto. So, yes, it was a very autonomous flyby. On the other hand, the New Horizons spacecraft isn't doing the science, right? That's happening here. So I would suggest that while this is a very autonomous example of space exploration, the exploring part is a partnership between this vehicle and the humans at APL and our partners like SWIRI who are doing the actual science research. So a partnership between autonomous systems and humans is another, I think, very powerful idea for us to think about and explore as we go forward. But there are many who want to push toward full autonomy. If you think of a spectrum, right, I started my career on one end of that spectrum. A lot of people are pushing and interested and excited by the other end of that spectrum. But Hollywood isn't very kind to us when they portray that end of the spectrum, at least not usually. I think it's interesting to note that the Director of Research in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy just gave a talk I heard, and he said that they've actually engaged Hollywood to ask them to please be a little kinder to robots in their movies because it's really not working so well for, pushing forward on the bounds of autonomous systems and AI. So it's a question. I don't know the answer, but are the movies infecting the public with fear? Or are the movies capitalizing on a fear that already exists? I don't know, but it's certainly more common to see movies like Ex Machina than it is characters like Data. But there are other examples, right? There's R2-D2, there's WALL-E, and there's a new example called Bottler. How many of you have heard of Bottler? Have anybody? Some of you have heard of Bottler. So this is an example that I like very much because it's an example of what I call develop thoughtfully. And that's my theme here today and what I want to leave you with, this notion that we develop and we push, but we do it thoughtfully. So this is a very different example than national security, but I like it because these guys that were actually written up in Fast Company for Creativity, they actually did a survey of the public on how people would feel if they had a robot deliver their toothbrush when they forgot it at a hotel, or their towels or whatever. So they used that information as they designed this little guide to clearly, as they portray it, to be lovable, not scary. So this little guy, when it's going down the hall, if it gets confused or something goes wrong, what their survey said is if it stops, suddenly people are alarmed. What's that thing going to do? What happened? What's going on? So they just put a simple little program in there where instead of stopping suddenly, he just kind of coasts over to the wall and stops. So now everybody's like, oh, the poor robot, he's lost. We got to help it, right? One little change in the program went from alarm to sympathy, trying to help the robot, okay? That's very creative, developed thoughtfully. Now, easier with Bottler than some of the other examples that we have going on, but still, I think it conveys. These guys are fielding this. It's now in a hotel in Silicon Valley, and they're pushing forward. So that brings me to the notion of could versus should. I tell the APL director, Dr. Ralph Semmel, when we talk about this, it's okay, this is a place of could, and I'm looking out at an audience of could. All of you guys are excited about what you could do, what you could build. And believe me, we just heard it talk. It's exciting. I'm the analyst that brings the question, but should you? And the should question has multiple components to it. One component is, does it make a difference? Is that thing that you can build going to actually contribute in some way to a problem, to the betterment of society? Is it going to make a difference? The second should question is the technology really there to do it? I think sometimes we do get just a little ahead of ourselves in technology, at least in the Defense Department. Many programs have taken a lot longer and a lot more expensive to build than were originally promised by people who were looking at could a little optimistically. And then the final question on should is the public concerns. And public concerns, I think, are frequently waved away by many in the development community. Certainly, they are in the Defense Department as just, we've just got to get past that policy. We just got to change that law. I mean, they're holding us back. And what I think we don't always accept is that public policy is a reflection of public opinion, public views, public attitudes, public norms. And so my suggestion here, and I'm going to give you some examples, is that in the could versus should thinking, we should accept that public views are valid and not just try to wave them away as stupid or ignorant. Accept them and use them to develop thoughtfully as we push forward in our tech development, sort of like Bottler. So as I've been looking at this for national security applications of autonomous systems, one of the very first things that comes up is lethal autonomous systems and what that will mean. And as we've done our analysis of this, we've found that public concerns for lethal autonomous systems falls into 4 broad categories. The first category is the category of intent. So all war is governed by something called the laws of armed conflict. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but it is something that all major powers pretty much subscribe to. And they're very legal and complicated and go on forever, but there's simply 2 basic principles I can share with you quickly. One is the idea of proportionality. So if country X takes out a ship, it is not a proportional response to annihilate country X, okay? It would be a proportionate response to take out the system that shot the ship, but you see, that's proportionality. And then the other really important aspect of laws of armed conflict with regard to autonomy is the idea of the ability to judge intent. You need to be able to discriminate between combatants and civilians, okay? So that's something that humans spend a lot of time working on. That Reaper example and all that data, they spend a lot of time analyzing that data to make sure that when they use weapons, they are going against combatants and not civilians. So the closer the combatants and the civilians are to each other, the harder that is to do. So the question here is, will autonomous systems ever be able to judge intent? And this is hotly debated, by the way. So there's a whole group of people that are arguing that in the future, autonomous systems will be better at able to comply with the laws of armed conflict because they aren't passionate. They don't have psychological trauma from warfare. They are just going to analyze, assess, and do the right thing every time. Then there's another camp, and they're not so sure. And they're very concerned about intent. One of the things that I'll just throw out there about intent that we talk about at the lab is whether or not we're really sophisticated enough and when we will be sophisticated enough in our technology to do this reliably. And I think that every time I write a text and my spell checker changes a word that completely changes the intent of my sentence, and I figure it out after I hit send and I want to throw the thing across the room, it comes to mind, right? I mean, if you can't do that, how can you judge intent in a complex situation between combatants and civilians, especially when they're commingled? So intent is something we're going to have to work our way through. The next issue is accountability. Now, that is an actual photograph of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in front of a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing. Doesn't that look like fun? Don't you wish you guys got to do that? Well, it's not fun, I'll tell you. So, accountability. Every one of the people in this picture, our military leaders at the highest level, understand that when something goes wrong in military applications, they are accountable. We are a nation that likes accountability. Look at all of our legal issues, right? So we believe that accountability is important. So when an autonomous system does something wrong, who is going to be accountable? Well, I tell you what, my military colleagues are sure it's going to be them, no matter what. So they're going to need some real assurances that these things are going to work right. But is that the right answer? What is lethal accountability with autonomous systems? I'm not sure. Is it the programmer? Is it the builder? Maybe it's the guy who did the maintenance. I don't know. But we've got to figure out accountability. And I don't think this is just a military application question. I think we're going to have accountability issues in our society as we introduce these things more and more and more. Now, happily, I think this is a develop thoughtfully thing. I think we can figure that out. I think you guys can figure that out. I think you can put in a trace from the very beginning of the development of a system such that if something goes wrong, you can bring that autonomous system back, you can download it, and you can figure it out. What went wrong? Was it the software? Was it the maintenance? When was the maintenance done? Et cetera, et cetera. So we can build an accountability chain into the system, maybe. I don't know. We have to think about it, but it's another example of develop thoughtfully. Another concern is that the distance that we as humans will have from warfare if we use lethal autonomous systems will decrease our sensitivity to suffering, and we'll be more willing to engage in war. So again, this is a tough one. I don't see a development in kind of solution to this, but I will point out that it's not really new. The last 14 years, we have had ground forces engaged in combat, and the suffering has been up close and personal for them and for us. But we also have a lot of other capabilities in our forces today and have for decades that have very, very long standoff ranges where the people who are employing the weapon do not see the impact of that weapon. So that does separate from suffering. And I think we're still very, very cautious as a nation about engaging in warfare. So I think that's a policy question, and it's one, but people are concerned about it. And then our favorite concern is that lethal autonomous systems will lead to a dystopian society, right? And Hollywood has made this very, very graphic for us. So what's the answer here? I don't know. So is Hollywood just wrong? Is this silly? Is this a silly concern? I don't know. There's some pretty important people out there talking about this, and I'm sure you all have heard all of the quotes from Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking about, artificial intelligence and its dangers. I think that I have a long commute now, so I just had the opportunity to listen to iRobot from start to finish, and it was really pretty cool and interesting and very prescient in many ways. And so is that an answer? Do we pull out his 3 laws and think about them? I don't know. But again, as a development community, I think we're going to have to tackle this fear and figure out how we can be assured that the things we are developing for the future lead society to good outcomes and not bad. And even if we can do it, we're going to have to be able to do it in a way that assures people so that we change public attitudes and allay their fears, and so that they get as excited as we all are about this technology, and we drop that fear factor. So my point to you today is not stop developing. Goodness, no. I think it's so exciting that we're all here, all the development that you're doing, all the cool stuff that's going on today. It's amazing. You are leading the way, and we need to lead the way in technology development. But I am encouraging you to think a little bit about developing thoughtfully, asking the should question as well as the could question, and thinking about partnerships between humans and robots and humans and autonomous systems, and what that partnership might mean and what that might mean for the development community, because that's probably going to be the way things are going to go, and have gone anyway, for a long time. So Nick said I could give you guys a few minutes to ask questions, so that's my remarks. I'd like to now open it up if any of you have any questions. I think we have just a few minutes. Any questions? Yes? Oh, sorry. So that's a great point. I don't know. The question was, does the concerns that were expressed by Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking more about misappropriation of funds or the wrong focus of funds not helping society versus weapons. So I don't know. I didn't talk to them. I just read the quotes. The quotes are pretty stark, that artificial intelligence is like summoning the devil, I think was one of them. That's a little hard to think about good of society. But I don't know. But I think the point you're making is part of develop thoughtfully. And I think that kind of thinking, what do we mean by that? And how do we do it so that it turns out for the good of society and not for weaponry and things that can be used in bad ways? Other questions? Thoughts? Comments? Yes? Honest with the public. Whoa, that has such a strident tone. Suggests the government is not honest with the public. So I can only speak to my own experience. I was in the Defense Department for 5 years. I was at a very senior level. And I can tell you that there are things that we develop that remain very highly classified, that we have to keep very highly classified in order to protect our technological edge and make certain that we're capable against potential adversaries who do our potential adversaries are investing like crazy in this kind of technology, much more than we are. So maintaining our technological edge is one of the things I spend a lot of my personal time working on and worrying about. But honest with the public, if you are willing to accept that your elected representatives on the Hill are your representatives as the public, there is nothing that the department does or that's developed that can't be shared with them. They have all the clearances, there are closed testimonies, all of these things are presented and debated to them. No, it's not going to show up in the paper if it's a cutting-edge technology that gives us a technical edge in terms of an adversary capabilities, but certainly it would be reported to Congress. And I saw that over and over. And as far as misrepresenting facts to the public purposefully, that's against the law, and it's not something I ever saw the Defense Department do. In fact, I was very pleased that every conversation I was ever in about any such topic, the Defense Department leans more toward sharing information than against, again, unless it's something that we have to safeguard very carefully through security classification. So that's been my experience. It's 5 years of experience, so. Other. Yes, you're welcome. Yes. So the question is, how concerned are we about adversaries hacking into our artificial intelligence? That's a very real concern, and I'm glad you brought it up. I think that in the category of public concerns, it doesn't come up as much, but it does come up in intent. If you talk to a serviceman, we actually are working DARPA program on an Army unmanned autonomous system that brings, that actually flies in for evacuation. So this helicopter comes in, autonomously lands, and then you get on it and go away. When you talk to the guys on the ground and they see this thing coming and they don't see eye contact with the pilot and they're under fire, they're not real happy. They're worried. You know, what's it going to do? How do I know what it's going to do? And how do I know the enemy hasn't taken it over and now it's going to turn on me? So again, in the Develop Thoughtfully camp, the people that developed that system had to put in last-minute safeguards, a communication check, and an ability of the guys on the ground to know, nope, I'm here for you, and I'll go where you want. But that wasn't the original design. That wasn't the place that they started. So I will just leverage your question, if you will indulge me, to this very thoughtful community that's leading the edge. Cyber is a very real concern. The more that we connect and touch the internet, the more vulnerable that we are, unless we think about it differently. And I don't have magic there. But I think adversaries taking control of the cool stuff we're developing, unless we develop it in such a way that it's safeguarded in some very assured way, it is a concern and something that I think even the most benign Internet of Things in your home, if you're an important person, do you really want that in your home? I don't know. You might want to think about it because it can be used against you if you're not careful. I think one more question and then I think I have to wrap up. Yes? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it's a very interesting question. I think there's an ethics panel later that's maybe going to take that on. I have not looked at that analytically, so I can't really comment. But I know that that there is a, what is it? You all probably know. There's a ASPCA already out there for robots, right? So I know I think it's a trend to watch. I think it's an ethics question. I do think the more empathetic we get with our machines, the more we are going to think about them from that vein, and that's going to bring in new policy questions that are very interesting. But I haven't looked at it myself, so it would just be speculation. Hey, I look forward to talking with you all more. Thank you very much. It's, again, a great pleasure to be here. This is a great conference, and have fun.
Thank you so much. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. I remember when I was talking with Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, they said, you know, I think we have 2 people we should send that'd be fantastic. They said, one, you know, she was the highest ranking female in the Pentagon, in the history of the Pentagon. And I just thought, you gotta be kidding me. So Christine Fox is a legend in my book, and she's gonna be here the whole time answering questions you have. You get a chance to talk with her afterwards. A few things.